home. I've got puppy fever. It's time for me to replace my beloved departed Wonder Lab, and it's going to happen soon. I know. Laura, thank you.
Have a great show.
Thank you. All right, this is a Fox News alert. New fires exploding tonight on the West Coast, including one in Lake County, California, sending flames roaring 20 feet into the sky and forcing brand new rounds of evacuations. Those deadly fires are claiming the lives of firefighters and civilians alike. Are authorities doing enough to warn Californians about the fast-moving danger in time? Plus, you're going to hear from a local hero voluntarily risking his own life to save others. And major White House moves tonight. From new developments on the potential for the president to sit down with special counsel Robert Mueller to a possible government shutdown over the border wall. And later, the Justice Department creates a religious liberty task force. Now, critics say it's nothing more than a license to discriminate against minorities and the LGBT community, and that Christians in particular need no protection at all. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We will get to all of your political headlines in just minutes, but first, breaking news from Oregon to California. Wildfires are ravaging the West Coast. In Oregon, new evacuation notices have been ordered near the Merlin and Grants Pass area, and there are more than a dozen active fires raging across California right now. Correspondent Jeff Paul is live from Redding tonight, where the deadly car fire is engulfing homes and businesses. Good evening, Jeff.
Well, yeah, Shannon, we are in one of the hardest hit neighborhoods here in the city of Redding. Rows and rows of homes destroyed by the car fire. In fact, the home behind us leveled and reduced to just about only ash. And one of the only few items that remains recognizable is this pickup truck parked in the driveway that was burned right down to the metal. Now, at least 6 people have died as a result of the fire. It is now 23% contained. Firefighters say it is still growing. It is more than doubled in size from over the weekend, where it stands at more than 100,000 acres. It's also destroyed more than 700 structures, many of which are family homes.
It's unfortunate if our house is burned, which it sounds like there's only 2 places standing, so the chances are that it probably did.
Really, I think people just want to know what's going on with their house. And it's kind of like nobody wants to give them the bad news, if it's there or not, or if it's burned down.
Now, that is a reality that many residents who were evacuated will soon have to face. CAL FIRE tonight deciding to allow the first round of evacuees to return to their homes finally, but many of them will brace themselves for the absolute worst, not knowing if they are one of the hundreds of people who have lost their homes. Now, throughout the state, there are several other wildfires burning in California, a total of 17 major wildfires burning a total of 200,000 acres throughout California. 2 fires in particular burning along the coast. The river fire and the ranch fire have started to grow in size and intensity.
Terrain is really steep. This is a terrain topography driven fire, along with some local winds that we're experiencing up in the higher elevations, like up in Highway 175 where I was. It's fairly windy up there, so it's being pushed by very, very critically dry fuels, the terrain and the wind. So kind of the perfect recipe for a major wildfire.
Now, the Ferguson fire continues to burn near Yosemite National Park. In fact, that fire has grown a little bit in size. It is contained to about 30%, but a lot of that smoke has forced the park to close during peak tourism season, forcing some folks to cancel their summer trips to the park. There is a sliver of good news, Shannon. We're hearing that the park could open portions of Yosemite by Friday. Shannon?
All right, Jeff Paul live for us on the scene of those fires. Thank you. Tonight, a firefighter killed in the line of duty near Sequoia Kings National Park is being remembered as one of the best. Just 33 years old, Brian Hughes was battling the Ferguson fire as part of a team of elite hotshots when he was struck by a tree and died a short while later.
Hughes is our second fatality attached to this fire in Mariposa County. And what I would like to attempt to convey and extend to you and the community, and especially our cooperators and professionals assigned to this fire, is from the hearts of the citizens of Mariposa County. It's hard to articulate, but our community just wants to convey their thanks and respect and the feeling of weight on their hearts as they recognize that these professionals are here helping our families.
Risking their own lives. Well, flags are flying at half-staff in California to honor Hughes. Amid the carnage and devastation, the list of heroes like Hughes is growing. And they now include a former Marine. Tucker Zimmerman joins us now. He's been focused on rescuing livestock that had to be left behind, but also humans, too, where he can do that from the car fire in Redding, California. Tucker, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us on here.
Okay, so I understand that this is really grown. You've got a Facebook page, and when you get information from people about where animals have been left behind, you now have 30 to 60 people helping. You borrowed a trailer from your job where you work. What motivated you to go out there and start trying to go back to places where people left their livestock behind?
Well, the men and women that I served with in the military, it was kind of a driven thing that was instilled in me. And being retired for 2 years, I felt a void in my heart that I didn't know I had until Thursday morning at 7:30 when I seen the news. And it brought me to here to where I was able to evacuate animals and people and help out our local emergency personnel and provide a place for sanctuary and now a morale booster with common communication through Cowboy 911 Facebook page.
Yeah, that's the Facebook page, Cowboy 911. If people can give you information about where these animals are left behind or where help may be needed, you can try to motivate those other volunteers that you have, up to 60 of them that we talked about, 20 to 30 trucks trying to get these animals out of there. I know you've come across humans that you've had to say, you got to go too and help them get out. But let me ask you this. Do you think people have gotten enough of a warning? We heard from one man who lost his wife and 2 of his great-grandchildren, and he said simply they didn't have enough warning time.
It wasn't enough warning time, but I think we kind of got caught into, we are in a mountainous terrain area, and we've seen a lot of fires and how they move and how they devastate, but this one was not a fire that we were ready to even foresee. It came through here so fast, it doubled in size in one night. It was as fast as I can run down a road that the fire was literally chasing us. And the devastation is just overwhelming at times, but we just keep our heads up and we take care of our people and we rally together. We're Shasta County. People like Justin Jones and Cody Jones, they provide their facilities, they provide their knowledge, they provide their work ethic, and they keep me in drive. And all the other, there is dozens and dozens and dozens of people that have volunteered their time, their assets to help us.
Yeah, and just to keep highlighting these fire crews that are going out there, they're voluntarily walking into these situations, trying to save property, trying to save lives, often at the cost of their own lives, as we see. And we saw a picture that went viral this weekend about exhausted firefighters who just curled up with their equipment in someone's yard after they'd saved the house and were there sleeping. What is the toll like there? Because we hear the conditions, as you mentioned. One of the reports we saw tonight was that there's so much dry material, the winds are whipping up, that there's just so much feeding this fire that it's nearly impossible to get these blazes under control. And it's got to be absolutely exhausting for everyone, you volunteers, all the way through these crews who are trying to help folks.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at, I know personally, last night I slept for a whole grand total of an hour. The night before, 2 or 3 hours. The night before that, 2 or 3 hours. I don't think I slept on Thursday night. I slept on the couch. I've been sleeping on the couch for the last 4 or 5 days, and getting up as soon as my phone rings and watching the next course of action that CAL FIRE comes out with, and we just formulate a plan and we rally together and get our teams going, and that's how we do our effort out here. And it's just, you know, it's a fire, and you just got to deal with it. You can't change it, but you just got to deal with it.
Well, you know, we're hearing from people who have left their animals behind, saying that this is so reassuring to them to know that someone is there. It gives them a mental boost knowing they may have lost everything, to think maybe their animals have been saved in the process. And as we said, you've come across humans you've been able to help as well. As a Marine, we know that you take leaving no one behind very seriously. Thank you for stepping up and doing this, and for all of the other crews and folks who are out there. Tucker, we thank you.
Everybody would do the same thing that I'm doing. We just have the opportunity, and it's just our time right now.
All right, we thank you. We'll continue to follow your story. Again, Cowboy 911 on Facebook if you have a concern that they can help out with. Thanks, Tucker. Our other top story tonight, President Trump ramping up his attacks on special counsel Robert Mueller and what appears to be his harshest, most personal critique yet. Also tonight, the president's legal team says it is highly unlikely the president will sit for a voluntary interview with Mueller. Jonathan Hunt has the latest on the Russia probe and the new developments. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, good evening, Shannon. The door is not completely shut on the idea of the president agreeing to an interview with the special counsel, but it is closing fast, according to Mr. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani.
I'm no on a sit down until we get ironed out exactly what they want to do. Right now, I'm telling them no way.
It's not impossible, of course, that the Trump team would say one thing and then do another. And by using the phrase right now, Giuliani is leaving himself and the president some wiggle room. But it would appear unlikely that Mr. Trump would want to offer legitimacy to an investigation he described on Twitter over the weekend as the, quote, Robert Mueller rigged witch hunt and an illegal scam. And from Trump Sr. to Trump Jr., Democrats have renewed their calls for the president's son to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee again, following claims by President Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, that Don Jr. told his father in advance about the controversial June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians. Committee Chairman Senator Chuck Grassley said today if Trump Jr. didn't tell the committee the truth in his original testimony, then it would be a matter for the Justice Department, not the committee. And the Trump team continues to attack Mr. Cohen, once one of the president's most trusted lawyers, for recording at least one of his conversations with the president, during which Mr. Trump, just before the 2016 election, discussed paying off a Playboy model who claimed to have had an affair with him. Rudy Giuliani today called Cohen a, quote, scoundrel, and Senator Lindsey Graham, sometimes a critic of the president, sometimes a defender, told Fox News yesterday that Americans should be, quote, very suspicious of Michael Cohen. Mr. Cohen's attorney, Lanny Davis, refused to fire back tonight against the personal attacks, telling us here simply he declined to comment, quote, concerning the matters possibly under investigation at this time. All of this happening, of course, Shannon, just ahead of the first trial resulting from the Mueller probe, that of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort on bank and tax fraud charges. That begins tomorrow, and don't expect this roller coaster ride to end anytime soon. Shannon?
All right, you are, Jonathan, and Peter Ducey is going to have a preview of that Manafort trial in just a minute. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Sure.
All right, some on the left say indictments are only a matter of time without citing any actual hard evidence. So what really is coming down the pike? Let's break it down with our legal eagles, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman and Attorney Harmeet Dillon. Great to have you both with us tonight.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, I want to play what Democrat Congressman Steve Cohen has to say about potential indictments of people close to the president.
Well, I think they're getting closer to knowing that the truth's going to come out, that there was activities with the Trump campaign in Russia and releasing those hacks and guiding them to the states and the localities where they came from. Some of that was Jared Kushner's responsibilities. Some of it was Donald Jr. I think you're going to probably see indictments of both of those people.
Harry, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is a pretty bold statement, Shannon. And there are two rules of thumb here. One, Mueller knows quite a bit more than the public knows, and two, speculations about what he knows are as likely as not to be unfounded. Now, there is reason to think, based on the Michael Cohen developments, that Donald Trump Jr. in particular is in the crosshairs. He does seem to have been particularly involved in it. He does seem to have lied about it. And you could see him as a logical investigative next step. But in general, Mueller from the start has been methodical and professional, and anyone who tells you what's happening next is likely just speculating.
Okay, so we know with respect to Don Jr., he has talked to lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Senator Patrick Leahy, one of the most senior Senate Democrats, says this in a tweet a couple of days ago. He now needs to come back before the Senate Judiciary Committee in public and under oath. Now, this is provoked in part because of statements we've gotten from Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney. This is what Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican, has to say about Cohen coming back to the Hill.
He's on record, Cohen is, and if he's got something new to say, don't leak it to NBC News. You need to come to either the Judiciary Committee, the Intel Committee, or both, and be willing to say what you're going to say under oath. And to every American, if I were you, I would be very suspicious of Michael Cohen right now.
Harmeet, what do you think? Who's in more trouble here, Don Jr. or Michael Cohen?
Well, Michael Cohen is undoubtedly in trouble, but for things that have nothing to do with Donald Trump or the Russia investigation. And, you know, one key tell here is that if this Cohen prosecution had to do with the Mueller and Russia investigation, Mueller wouldn't have handed it off to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. He would have kept it, and that would have been a clue to us that this whole investigation involves the Russia collusion. It seems not to, or he wouldn't have handed it off. So that's one. I completely agree with Senator Graham that if Mueller has something to say and he wants to say it under oath, you know, there are audiences for that. He's made some remarks that have been leaked by his, you know, lawyers, and he's now represented by a Clintonista inside circle of the Clinton administration, and so that's, you know, very fishy. And also, Shannon, you're a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. You know, what lawyer does this kind of behavior? Number one, you know, tapes his clients, throws his clients under the bus in the media, leaks to the media. You know, this is all outrageous behavior. I think he's a very non-credible witness. And finally, I don't think that Donald Trump Jr. has anything to worry about based on Michael Cohen's uncorroborated, unverified, and frankly untrustworthy statements to the media.
Okay, so with all three of us being lawyers, I want to quickly ask both of you to respond to this idea about whether or not the president should sit down with Robert Mueller. Harry, first, what advice would you give?
You know, it's been a flirtation for several months. It's never been real. It's bogus. The advice I would give is don't do it, because he has committed crimes, and he'll either find himself having to lie about them, or he'll cop and inculpate himself. By the way, the Cohen stuff very much concerns Trump. It just doesn't concern the Russia part of Trump. But clearly, if Cohen can be corroborated, and there's much reason to think, it's like any other trial. You have a suspicious witness, you see about the corroborating evidence. If he can be corroborated, it goes right to the president.
All right, Harmeet, he's already convicted. Harry has, judge and jury. He says the president's committed crimes. Would you tell him to testify or to sit down with Mueller or not?
First of all, it's outrageous for a lawyer to say that, not knowing what the evidence is. That's unfortunate. But secondly, no, and hell no. The president should definitely not sit down with Mueller under these circumstances.
All right, Harmeet, we're putting you down for hell no. Harry, I think, agrees with you, maybe for different reasons. All right, Harry and Harmeet, thank you both for weighing in. Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, Judge Brett Kavanaugh's prospects for a swift confirmation to the Supreme Court appear to be improving. GOP Senator Rand Paul is now supportive. And this afternoon, Kavanaugh met with Senator Joe Manchin. He's the first Democrat to meet with the president's pick for the high court. The Manchin meeting could set the stage for other swing vote Democrats to talk with Kavanaugh, despite feeling pressure from party leaders not to. Also tonight, the oldest current Supreme Court justice, 85-year-old Ruth Bader Ginsburg, says she is planning to stay on the high court for at least 5 more years. When we return, President Trump again making his case demanding funding for the border wall, along with the threat of a possible government shutdown.
I would be certainly willing to consider a shutdown if we don't get proper border security.
And is Kim Jong-un going back on his word? North Korea reportedly building new missiles. So who's leaking the highly classified intel reports on the rogue regime, and why? Italy's populist leader Giuseppe Conte is fast becoming one of President Trump's closest allies in the international arena, thanks to similar domestic policies like cracking down on illegal immigration. In a joint appearance with Conte today, President Trump doubled down on his threat to shut down the government this fall if he doesn't get funding for that border wall. What could it mean for the midterms and for Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination process? Garrett Tenney is gaming out the possible shutdown scenarios.
There are concerns that both of those things could be at risk, and that is in part why House and Senate Republicans are once again trying to convince the president not to force a shutdown when the government runs out of money on October 1st. Just last week, GOP leaders met with the president and thought they were on the same page, but that quickly changed Sunday when President Trump tweeted he was willing to shut the government down over immigration, and today he doubled down on that position.
As far as the border is concerned, and personally, if we don't get border security, after many, many years of talk within the United States, I would have no problem doing a shutdown.
GOP leadership is warning the White House that a shutdown could have dire consequences on the party, including the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. If Judge Kavanaugh isn't confirmed by October 1st when the Supreme Court's new term begins, a shutdown of a couple of weeks could delay that process until late October or even into November after Election Day. GOP leadership is also concerned about voter backlash over a shutdown and potentially losing control of the House if President Trump is seen as the architect of it. But in that one-day shutdown earlier this year, it was pointed out that shutdowns don't necessarily portend electoral issues for Republicans. For example, in 1995, the public largely blamed Newt Gingrich and the GOP for a 21-day shutdown. 1 year later, though, Republicans gained 2 seats in the Senate and retained their majority in the House for the first time since 1928. Then in 2014, a year after Republicans closed the government for 16 days over Obamacare, they took control of the Senate for the first time in 8 years and gained their biggest majority in the House in decades. GOP leadership isn't taking any chances today, though, and are planning to meet the president's deadline of having nearly all of the government's spending bills passed by September, and then address the last few together later this year, including funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which includes the border wall. Now, if nothing else, they are hoping they can get the president to hold off on a shutdown at least until after the midterms, and hopefully Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation.
Okay, so with all of that in mind, the president today, standing there alongside Giuseppe Conte, talked about the possibility, dropped a stunner involving Iran.
Yeah, it caught a lot of folks by surprise when the president said that. After all, just over a week ago, President Trump threatened Iran's president with dire consequences, the likes of which few in history have suffered. Today, though, the president struck a much different tone, not only saying he's willing to meet with Iran, but that he's willing to do it without any preconditions.
So I believe in meeting. I would certainly meet with Iran if they wanted to meet. I don't know that they're ready yet. No preconditions. No. If they want to meet, I'll meet. Anytime they want. Anytime they want. It's good for the country, good for them, good for us, and good for the world.
Ironically, back in 2007, then-candidate Barack Obama gave nearly a very similar answer during a debate with Hillary Clinton when asked if he was willing to meet with the dictatorial leaders of countries such as Iran without preconditions. This evening, though, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo attempted to clarify the president's response by listing a number of preconditions for any meeting during an interview on CNBC.
If the Iranians demonstrate a commitment to make fundamental changes in how they treat their own people, reduce their malign behavior, can agree that it's worthwhile to enter a nuclear agreement that actually prevents proliferation, then the president said he's prepared to sit down and have the conversation with them.
Yeah, so far, Iran has shown little interest in meeting with President Trump or in changing its behavior. The White House is expecting that to change starting 1 week from today, though, when the first round of U.S. sanctions on Iran from the canceled nuclear deal will go into effect.
Yeah, we'll see, because again, Pompeo and others have been talking directly to the Iranian people, and we know that will impact them probably much more than the leaders themselves. All right, Garrett, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right, citing anonymous officials familiar with the intelligence, the Washington Post reporting tonight that North Korea is still working on intercontinental ballistic missiles. The officials, who again spoke on condition of anonymity because they were discussing classified intel, reportedly said satellite photos taken in recent weeks support the contention that work continues on the missiles capable of reaching the United States. The White House tonight tells us it doesn't comment on intelligence. Before this latest report, I asked Secretary of State Mike Pompeo whether North Korea is backpedaling after that Singapore summit.
No one's been closer to that than I have. So everyone else is simply speculating about what's taken place today. I've been there. The North Koreans have consistently reaffirmed their commitment, the commitment that Chairman Kim made to President Trump. No one was under any illusion that this was going to happen in hours or days or even weeks.
So what's behind the anonymous reports that some claim appear to be aimed at undermining the Trump administration's efforts at peace? Joining me now, Fox News contributor and former advisor to President Bill Clinton, Doug Schoen, and senior columnist for townhall.com, author of the new book, Militant Normals, Kurt Schlichter. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so a little bit more from the Washington Post article. I want to talk about the sourcing. They say this: according to the officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe classified intelligence, later adding, according to intelligence gathered by U.S. agencies. Later on, one U.S. official who, like the others, spoke on the condition of anonymity in discussing sensitive intelligence. Doug, why are they doing that now?
Well, they're doing it now because they think that the policy of the Trump administration is fatally flawed. Look, it is clear from this report and other reports, and I should add this one was very detailed, that the North Koreans have no intention of shutting down their nuclear program, that they agreed to a path to denuclearization on their terms. We need to get tough. The time for talking is done. Tighten sanctions on them, on the Chinese banks who deal with them. Go to the UN and say to the Russians and Chinese, well, you've got to get tough and cut off their energy supplies that go beyond the 500,000 barrel limit. Talking is not the answer. They called Mike Pompeo a gangster. We should react with tough policies.
Yeah, and Kurt, the secretary told me, listen, I'm the one who's actually been going there and seeing it, and I know the details of what's happening more than anyone else. We also know that Ambassador Haley to the UN issued a report just a couple of weeks ago that said China and Russia are continuing to enable North Korea by allowing all kinds of illegal shipments that violate the sanctions. I mean, how do you crack down on all three of those world powers to get this done? Can you?
Well, you certainly can, and you should. I agree with Doug. We've got to get tough. Donald Trump is operating on a dual track. He's doing what he did as a deal maker in New York, dealing with other lowlifes who you can't trust in his real estate business. He's talking them up positively, and he's got that hammer right behind him, ready to strike. This is a complex game. No one has any illusions about who the North Koreans are, least of all Donald Trump. He's dealt with dirtbags all his career, and he knows one when he sees one. I am a little upset about the release of this information, this classified information being put out there, apparently for political gain. As someone who held a top-secret clearance, that's a disgrace. Yeah. All right. Let's turn to this issue of the government shutdown as well. From Investors Business Daily, this is back in January. You know, we had a couple of mini kind of shutdowns. The headline was "The Myth That Government Shutdowns Hurt Republicans." They say, of course, every situation is different. There's no telling how this shutdown will affect votes in November. But for anyone to declare that this will hurt Republicans at the polls is either ignorant of recent history or unwilling to acknowledge it. They cite back to 1995 and 96 and also 2013. And Doug, you're the pollster, but they say ultimately, though people raise a stink about it, when it came to the votes after those two shutdowns, Republicans actually did much better than expected.
Well, Shannon, in 95, I was in the White House with Bill Clinton, and I saw the impact of the shutdown on the Republican Party. It hurt them, and it ultimately defeated Bob Dole. And I would say to do a shutdown a month before an election when you have the economy to run on would be a big, big mistake for the Republicans. It would also bring up the issue of the separation of families, which have not fully been unified. And I'm not suggesting that Trump will lose on immigration, but when you have an issue like 4.1% growth and terrific economic activity, why distract from that issue on immigration?
Well, because the president did promise people during his campaigning that he was going to build that wall. Kurt, here's what the Senate Majority Leader said about the possibility of a shutdown when he was asked.
So you're not worried about a government shutdown before the midterms? No, that's not going to happen.
Quick final response from you, Kurt.
Well, it doesn't need to happen if the Republicans get on the ball and support this president's policy. Look, I'm in touch with the base. I'm one of them. I'm a hardcore conservative, and I'm tired of establishment Republicans telling me, oh, we're just going to kick the can again, and we're going to sign this bill at the last minute because we're afraid of a shutdown. Let's rumble.
Oh.
I'd say be my guest. A month before the election, it's really money in the bank for the Democrats.
Okay, Doug and Kurt, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll see. We still have, 99 days to go, somewhere around there. We'll all be watching. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort's trial starts tomorrow, but some stunning developments revealed in court today. Peter Ducey has details. Plus, sordid allegations of sexual harassment and nearly unbelievable practices by a top official at FEMA. That story next. The former head of FEMA's Human Resources Unit, Corey Coleman, is under fire tonight as an internal investigation obtained by the Associated Press shows years of allegations of harassment. According to the report, Coleman allegedly created a toxic work environment, including improper sexual relationships with subordinates and giving preferential treatment to fraternity brothers. There are also allegations that Coleman hired women he met in bars and through online dating sites, and that a number of unqualified people still hold their positions at FEMA. Tonight, the House Oversight Committee says it plans to, quote, hold a hearing to fully examine the results and to determine what role Congress can play in making sure that never happens again. All right, the first case to go to trial in the special counsel probe into suspected Russian interference in the 2016 election is not expected to feature anything to do with Kremlin collusion. Rather, the trial of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort revolves around his lavish lifestyle and money he earned in Ukraine long before his brief association with the campaign. So Peter Ducey is here to give us a preview tonight. Hello, Peter.
Shannon, Paul Manafort was only the Trump campaign chairman for 3 months, but the special counsel's office still poured through years' worth of pre-Trump campaign financial records, and now the government is hinting that their case against him might not have much to do with the 2016 election at all.
Paul Manafort has done an amazing job. He's here someplace. Where's Paul?
When Paul Manafort was the Trump campaign chairman, he worked for free, and now we know he could afford not to draw a salary because the U.S. government just revealed that more than a decade ago, Manafort and his partner Rick Gates started accumulating $60 million. The special counsel Robert Mueller included the eye-popping amount in a court filing today, alleging Manafort hid the 9-figure amount he was paid by political figures in Ukraine, including some backed by Russia, from the IRS. The document makes clear that the government believes, quote, no pay stubs or paychecks reflect that income. So, if Manafort wasn't paying taxes, what was he spending his money on? His house in the Hamptons, since landscapers allegedly got more than $800,000 there. His floors, since he allegedly dropped about $1 million at an antique rug store in Northern Virginia. And his suits, since he allegedly spent almost $850,000 on men's clothing in New York and more than $520,000 on clothes in Beverly Hills. The suits are also apparently a sore spot.
Have you spoken with Mr. Manafort about the FBI raid on his house?
Yes. He believes, as I do, that it is outrageous. They not only took away 2 folders of documents, all of which they already had, but they photographed all of his custom Italian suits in his closet. I cannot imagine for what reason. English tailoring is always better than Italian tailoring, at least for my body shape.
Paul Manafort is the first person caught up in the special counsel's probe to go to trial, a trial that looks like it is going to focus a lot more on allegations of financial crimes committed long before his brief stint with the Trump campaign than on questions about possible coordination or collusion with the Russians, which was the whole original goal of the special counsel when he was appointed. Shannon.
Do you want to weigh in on the tailoring at all? It's a little odd.
I basically wear the same blazer every day.
You go with the good old US of A, though. I have a feeling. All right, Peter, thank you. All right, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announces a religious liberty task force. One critic says Sessions is empowering groups to, quote, attack LGBTQ people and other minorities. Kelly Shackelford, CEO and president of First Liberty Institute, is one of the groups the left says has just been given a license to discriminate. Plus, Where in the World is next. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announcing today the Justice Department is creating a religious liberty task force, saying Western culture has become less hospitable to people of faith. But some on the left are greeting the new task force with skepticism, like this editorial in the Daily Beast headline, Jeff Sessions' Religious Liberty Task Force declares holy war on LGBT people. All right, let's talk about it with Kelly Shackelford, CEO and president of First Liberty Institute. And by the way, you know this is one of the groups that the left says now has a license to attack minorities and LGBT people. So how do you respond to that characterization of what you do?
It's just kind of bizarre. It's kind of silly hysteria. Anybody who watched what the Attorney General said, what they did today, they simply are following through on protecting religious freedom for everybody, people of all faiths. You saw all different faiths there today. And that's all. It didn't talk about any of these issues, these groups. Some of these groups are so obsessed with their issue that they think everything is about it. This is about freedom. And this really follows up. The president started with promises about religious freedom. He started with an executive order. And then you had the Attorney General, and that executive order asked the Attorney General to give guidance to all the departments, the federal agencies, and that's exactly what the Attorney General did in October, the 20 guidelines, and they were excellent. I mean, I've been doing religious freedom work for over a quarter century, and you know the difference between a political move or whatever, and those were excellent. They're solid, and so this is the next step, what happened today.
I want to read you a little bit more from the Daily Beast. It said, if you are opposed to marriage equality or just dislike or disapprove of LGBT people generally, the Trump administration just gave you the green light to go ahead and refuse to serve them in your business or help them with their medical care. If an LGBT person wants or needs to use your service, no problem. Tell them to shove off. The Attorney General is right behind you. I believe it was that same article where they talked about the fact that this is all about Christians who do not need protection in the United States of America.
It's just divorce from reality. I mean, it's nothing that the guidelines talked about. This is about freedom. Again, some of these groups are so obsessed with their issue that they think people shouldn't have a right to have differing opinions on it.
And they talk about the Baker case. I mean, with the Baker who had the case that the Supreme Court who said, I will serve people. I do serve LGBT people all the time. I won't craft a custom cake for them. They say that he's basically a bigot and that this is now the U.S. government protecting bigots. Well, look,
People have different beliefs about same-sex marriage in this country. And I think the thing that almost all Americans agree on is people have a right to have different beliefs. And a lot of those beliefs come from their faith, and that's religious freedom protected. The problem is these guidelines, when they were excellently done by the Attorney General Sessions following the President's orders, but that doesn't mean they're being implemented. So we are having a lot of problems. For instance, it's like General Mattis didn't get the memo. And so we're having all these military cases with chaplains, and I think of Chaplain Squires, who's gotten a Bronze Star, who's been awarded the Meritorious Service Award 5 times, and his career is now basically about to be thrown out. Why? Because he's being a good chaplain and following the regulations that he's supposed to. That should not be happening. And look, people think I'm making this up. Go to firstliberty.org, look at Chaplain Squires, look at what's happening. This is why the task force today, which takes people that are a part of the DOJ and saying, let's make sure we're focused on making sure these are implemented throughout the federal government. That's great for people of all faiths or no faith at all because it protects everyone's right to believe what they believe.
Yeah, and I would note that if people want to check out what the Attorney General had to say, he talked about cases they're prosecuting now protecting Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, all kinds of different faiths, and he says that's what this is going to be about. Kelly keeps us up to date. You always have interesting cases.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Shannon.
All right, time now for Where in the World. Turkish President Erdogan responding to the threat of U.S. sanctions over the detention of American pastor Andrew Brunson. Erdogan warning the U.S. could lose, quote, a sincere partner if it does not, quote, change its attitude. British officials admitting there wasn't a single Christian among the 1,112 Syrian refugees it resettled during the first 3 months of this year. Britain's immigration agency rejected 4 Christians who had actually recommended by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and only agreed to resettle Muslims. New tonight in the investigation into the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, a new report suggesting the plane's controls may have been deliberately manipulated to take it off course, but that it's not possible to